Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. Thomas Nagel in What Is It Like to Be a Bat, as he's bringing the various threads of his argument overall to a kind of conclusion, is going to have a very interesting set of observations about what he's going to call deceptive clarity in how the mind-body problem gets represented, in particular by what he's calling physicalist accounts, which would include behavioralist accounts, reductionist accounts, which say essentially there's no such thing as mind. That's a totally separate thing from body. We don't have to worry about the interaction. We can explain it all in terms of body, namely the brain, and its configurations. And he's going to say that physicalism is making a kind of identification using words like is or are, which seem a bit mysterious. And what are they putting on the two sides? Well, we have mental processes that are being correlated with physical processes, or elsewhere he's going to talk about states, and either one works just fine. As a matter of fact, we should probably include both of those. And what is physicalism asserting? Well, these mental processes and states just are certain kinds of physical processes and states. So the subjective character of experience could be explained, represented, however you want to think about it, reduced to the objective character. And we could, use the word facts for both of these, the facts of subjective experience, or as he's going to call it, phenomenal or phenomenological experience, as opposed to something that we could grasp through science, which doesn't really involve any reference to our own senses or stuff like that. He actually has talked earlier about other species perhaps partaking in that as well. And maybe there's a kind of spectrum between subjective and objective. And so that's the idea there. And Nagel's saying, well, hold on. Things aren't quite so simple and straightforward as you're making them out to be. He says, if we acknowledge a physical theory of mind, this sort of thing, must account for the subjective character of experience, we have to admit no presently available conception gives us a clue how this could be done. And he's going to say this is, a unique problem. We can do physical reduction with other things. Rainbows can just be, light cast in certain ways as the light goes through refractive processes in, air vapor, water vapor in the air or something like that, right? But we can't do that with the subjective character of experience, whether it's our own experience, the experiences of other human beings, or indeed that of a different species like bats. So he says, if mental processes are indeed physical processes, then there is something it is like intrinsically to undergo certain physical processes, but what it is for such a thing to be the case remains a mystery. This is a significant problem. What is supposed to be supplied here to make this work? So he's going to say, when two terms of identification are very disparate, it may not be so clear how it could be true. So the is or are that are being used here, seemingly so clear to us, the mind just is the brain, right? Mental states just are brain states, or pick whatever else you want. Maybe our gut bacteria plays a role, depending on what theory you have. Or perhaps mental states are just data in a computer. We could go to other substratums if we want to. And Nagel's going to say, well, that seems clear, but I believe it's precisely this apparent clarity of the word is or are that is deceptive. Why? Usually when we're told X is Y, we know how it's supposed to be true, but that depends on what he's calling a conceptual or theoretical background or framework, not conveyed just by the word is alone. We know that both X and Y refer and the kinds of things to which they refer, and we have a rough idea how the two referential paths might converge on a single thing, be it an object, a person, a process, an event, or whatever. But when those things are very different from each other, like subjective experience in our minds and what's happening in our brains, those are very different from each other. How do you actually connect them? So he says, well, we need a theoretical framework. Without this framework, what happens? An air of mysticism. Now, not mysticism as in like Neoplatonic mysticism or anything like that. This is mysticism as a bad word, meaning mystification. An air of mysticism surrounds this identification. We're going to come back to that in just a moment. Maybe we could also, as he says, rely on analogies with theoretical identification in other fields. So, we think about, we understand how mechanisms work and seem to generate something in, say, our computer or some other thing. We can just understand the mind and the body in that way. Well, no, because those analogies don't really hold up that well. So this is going to be a problem, and it leads to what he is calling mysticism or mystification. And he's going to, now backtracking a little bit, he's going to hedge what he's saying here. Should we say that because we don't understand how these things actually come together, should we say that physicalism is false? Well, no. He says it would be a mistake to conclude that. Nothing is proved by the inadequacy of physicalist hypotheses that assume a faulty objective analysis of mind. So he's going to say something really interesting after that. And notice how he's framing it. So it's not false, but we wouldn't know what it would take for it to actually be true, or we don't know what it would take. And because of that, we don't really understand physicalism at this point in time. So what does that imply? We actually have, another kind of identification here that's a little bit too easy. We've got a theoretical position on the relationship between mind and body that says that mind basically just is. Mind is basically just a kind of configuration of the body. We just got to, get into the details and we'll figure out all these connections. But it doesn't supply those. And that's going to be a bit of a problem because until we actually have an account that does that, we're not even sure what the hell we're talking about. So he says, physicalism is a position we can't understand because we don't have any conception how it might be true. Why? We lack the theoretical framework. We lack the analogies that are actually going to hold. What are we substituting for that? Well, he says this is the magical flavor of popular presentations of fundamental scientific discoveries given out as propositions to which one must subscribe without really understanding them. And now pause for a moment and think about your own experience with how fundamental scientific discoveries have been explained to you and whether you actually know anything about them. Think about electrons and quantum states and things like that. Or think about the very model of the atom, which, by the way, just in my lifetime has changed a little bit over time, right? And we can think about other things like, well, how does DNA actually work? Well, we have these kind of mental pictures of them that we got from, most of us not actually doing any real science, but being supplied those. And he uses the example, people are now told at an early age that all matter is really energy. Despite the fact that they know what is means, most of them never form a conception of what makes this claim true. Why? They lack the theoretical background or framework. Now he's going to draw a conclusion. At the present time, the status of physicalism is similar to that which the hypothesis that matter is energy would have had if uttered by a pre-Socratic philosopher. We don't have the beginnings of a conception how it might be true. In order to understand the hypothesis that a mental event is a physical event, this identification, we need more than an understanding of the word is. We need that theoretical framework, and right now we just don't have that. Now here he's going to bring up another interesting analogy himself, and he says, well, consider a room in which there's a caterpillar, and it goes into a chrysalis and emerges as a butterfly. We now know how that works, but we might not actually understand how it works, and we could have alternate theories about it, like the caterpillar contained a tiny winged parasite that devoured it and grew into a butterfly. And he says that Donald Davidson, who is, sort of a big deal at the time that he's writing this, has argued that if mental events have physical causes and events, they must have physical descriptions. And, this applies to intentional mental events, but could also apply to sensations. And he says that Davidson's position is that certain physical events have irreducibly mental properties, and perhaps some view describable in this way is correct. However, nothing of which we can now form a conception corresponds to it, nor do we have any idea what a theory would be like that enabled us to conceive of it. That's a big problem, right? According to Nagel. And so he's going to actually close in on something else. He says, very little work has been done on the basic question whether any sense can be made of experiences having an objective character at all. Does it make sense to ask what my experiences are really like as opposed to how they appear to me? We can't genuinely understand the hypothesis that their nature is captured in a physical description unless we understand the more fundamental idea that they actually have an objective nature, or that objective processes can have a subjective nature. And then there's a footnote. And that footnote asserts something quite remarkable about this. So not only do we have the mind-body problem as something that physicalist accounts, which seems so promising, turned out not to actually be able to supply because there's this, obfuscation or hand-waving, mysticism, magical thinking going on. It's also connected to another problem in philosophy and psychology and other things, the problem of other minds, as he says, which has a close connection with the mind-body problem. How so? If we understood how subjective experience could have an objective nature, we would understand the existence of subjects other than oneself. Now, we don't actually, unless we're philosophers in a classroom or solipsists of some sort, worry too much about the existence of other minds. We much more often wonder whether we're getting what they're saying right or whether we can understand their experiences. But maybe there is an interesting connection here, through what he's talking about with these two problems, and the solutions to them can't rely just on, as we call it, hand-waving, saying, there just is this condition. No, you have to be able to explain it. You have to be able to provide a theoretical framework. And Nagel is saying, listen, the theoretical framework that you're providing for physicalism, at least for the mind-body problem, it is not sufficient at this point in time for us even to be able to figure out what the hell this identification would be.